you remember, your body remembers how to be healthy. There's a part inside your brain, but you forgot. And there's a way to entrain yourself through the protocol, that yourself to manifest that basically through words and real intention, and that your brain can actually physically manifest those things.
Welcome back, fellow seekers, and all those new curious people joining in today. I think everybody is going to be fascinated by the conversation we're having today. It's going to bridge neuroscience with frequency, holographic nature of the universe, and weave together old truths and new philosophies and insights being brought into science. Jess Leffler's journey began in music, where he studied audio engineering that later developed an interest in the effects of sound and vibration on the body and mind. His curiosity later led him into cannabis research, chemistry, and pharmacology, exploring how different substances influence human physiology and well-being. This path eventually brought him to the study of neuroscience and psychology at Arizona State University, where he continued to explore the connections between consciousness, biology, and healing. Today, Jess brings these fields together in his work with the holonomic fractal genesis model, which looks at how sound, information, and perception may play a role in human health and transformation. So welcome, Jess, to the show, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
And I just wanted to start by asking, what was the moment that you realized that what you thought maybe before about the physical body, about health, or reality in general, that it changed fundamentally?
So that would have probably started, I was in my 20s, was when I read a book by Carlos Castaneda called The Teachings of Don Juan, which was about the Toltecs. And it started to give me a completely different perspective on reality. And that was the starting point for me. And I just started beginning to read more and more and more books by him. And I then started becoming fascinated with physics. And I felt like I started making all these connections between what these ancient people were saying and science today, that people were just undermining or being like, this is just metaphysical nonsense. And that's really what inspired me to start taking the path that I wanted to. Originally with neuroscience, I had went into it because I have a seizure disorder and nobody listens to me. And it's been very frustrating finding healing because just everyday medical system, unfortunately, and with working in pharmacy, they tend to fail patients. So
Yeah,
that's where it started, but I started moving to uh, the other aspect once I started getting interested in other things other than my personal health.
I think that this is a journey that a lot of people, it's familiar to them, this idea of the wounded healer or journeying based out of necessity. So feeling failed by something and knowing that there's got to be something more, that you're not just going to accept that this is just how things are going to be, and then using your curiosity to start exploring things. And for a lot of people, it seems like it mirrors your path where you started with some ancient knowing text and a philosophy, and then bringing and bridging it into something that's more relatable and understood to today's audience.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I just wanted to really dial in maybe on what your opinion of disease or imbalance in the body, if that's even how you do see it, how did it evolve with your education and your understanding and your personal experience with health?
Oh, um, Really, it was the fact that I just continued having seizures, and there's just it felt like there was no end in sight. I knocked my front teeth out, so my front teeth are all fake. Um, and just with the fact that I was working in pharmacy, nothing was going right. I just needed something more, and that's when I got into cannabis. I started using CBD. I went seizure free for a year from that. And that also started making me realize that there was a whole thing with plant medicines and a whole another aspect of healing that I was just not aware of. And that those types of things is kind of what started making me um, be willing to open up to new ideas, new uh, established ways of thinking, um, in order to make the best decisions to get true healing.
And I think that's a really beautiful transition too, because when we go to plant medicine and to food in general, even whether that's supplements, diet,
Mm.
or if it's whether it is botany and herbalism and even root medicine, where we're looking at maybe even these psychedelic microdosing or components of plant medicine and how it can heal us. And to me, that feels like a very natural progression from still somehow in the physical realm where we're dealing with what we think of as a physical plant or a physical food we're eating, but starting to see the energetic patterns already emerging. Because what is the constituent? What is the part, the frequency signature of that type of medicine? Where, because I call it medicine here because it is medicine.
Yes, yes. Of course, I know several people who microdose for bipolar disorder who it has revolutionized their life. Um,
So when
So
you
I'm a huge supporter of it. I also have training from Dennis McKenna. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a famous ethnobotanist and pharmacologist. His brother was Terence McKenna, who's a famous mycologist and ethnobotanist. Um, he wrote a book called Food of the Gods, which was pretty popular back in the 60s. But I learned chemistry from him and learned a lot about like psychedelic plant medicines and the benefits. It's a healing with mental health disorders, but they're now showing that these substances, um, particularly right now, there are ibogaine studies showing that it can actually repair neurodegeneration and creating neuroplasticity in patients who are diagnosed with Parkinson's medication. It only works for so long before it just stops working. It doesn't have any more effectiveness. So things like that also inspired me to just get into this whole ancient way of thinking and healing and just kind of looking at the universe in general.
And it to me, like it's interesting you bring up Ibogaine because the book I'm working on writing right now is about my journey with Ibogaine and MS. So I
Okay,
experimented on
all
myself
right.
because I couldn't find anyone who was researching, and I am a curious person. So I thought, well, I'll be the guinea pig. And I sourced out Ibogaine and I figured out a dosing schedule with the help of guides. And I went through a 90-day journey. And I'm writing about that now. And the part I like about this, and I think the fact of I haven't read the book or heard of the people you studied under, but I'm getting a picture and a feeling that these people are looking at these substances, much how I did with the ibogaine, as not just a substance to put in the body for a chemistry in the body reaction, but as almost like a spiritual bridge, or that these master plants have some kind of a frequency that is meant to interact with the human biofield and that it helps us in some way. And so all of the people that are using these types of, whether it's ibogaine or psilocybin or ayahuasca, that it's not used the way we think about other recreational drugs or even pharmaceutical drugs. This
Mhm.
is almost taken with a spiritual mission in mind, where there's an
Mhm.
intention behind it and there's like a respect and a reverence for this medicine and for the journey that it's going to take you on. Where the chemistry, which you can speak more to with your own history, when they take the one constituency out of that plant, they synthesize it in order to patent it and to sell it.
Mhm.
You lose a lot of that other secondary frequency and information that, was created in the whole form.
Yes, and I completely agree that the extraction you do lose a tremendous amount of alkaloids that are part of the experience. And one thing that I've always said about mushrooms and was confirmed by another neuroscientist as well, Andrew Gallimore, is that every mushroom has a different experience. The visuals, everything, how the experience connect is completely different. And the proposed idea, which I proposed and several other neuroscientists have proposed, is that what these drugs actually do is they allow you to see the geometry of the universe and how you are entangled with it, which makes the experience so meaningful because you once now have a connection with pre-space again, where you will go when you do this phase transition, um, from when you become carbon to light again. But when you take these drugs, you have this connection that with this realm that you don't have anymore. The ancient people could connect with it and resonate with this frequency through spiritual practice. They didn't necessarily need all these plant medicines. Today we've lost that ability, and through these substances, unless you are someone who experiences a lot of cultivation and a religious practice or whatever, um, it it promotes kind of this life changing experience because you finally become one with the geometry of the universe again, like how you were when you were born and you were innocent before your mind is corrupted by everything in our material world.
And I think that that is spot on what you're saying because my own experience with psychedelics and these types of root plants, when I was younger, it was definitely this escapism where you were doing it just to get high. And I would say this is not a place. There's no
Yeah.
spiritual question being asked. There's no mysticism. It was just escapism. But later in
Yeah.
life, I came full circle back to this where any of these things were done at a lower dose. It was done with intention. And I'd already, and I think that it really helped in my own healing journey because I'd already opened my
Mm-hmm.
mind because I had seen this connection to nature and to the cosmos because I'd experienced some of these things, whether in a meaningful way or, maybe an unhealthy way to do it. That opening, the thinning of the veil had already
Mm-hmm.
occurred for me, which allowed me to look differently at things. And that will actually
Yeah.
kind of really bring me into the next question I had for you in looking at your bio, which to me is so interesting. Because how did you start with audio engineering? And when you were starting with that, did you already look at uh, sound and music as medicine and vibration, or was this really just more in a application as a musician or some other form?
Um, well, with music, I was just one of those rebellious, ignorant kids in the 90s, early 2000s in a metal band, wanted to do music for a career. So I went to Full Sail University, which is like premier school for music and video game design. It's really expanded now. But I went there originally to do that, and then at the time, I had met another student, and he had been a DJ for a long time, and he had this massive collection of records. Next thing I know, that's what I'm doing. For me, music was always really, I guess, just kind of like soothing and just personal. Like I've always, it hasn't, for me, it's not ever really about the lyrics, it's the sounds. And it's like just hearing the music sometimes would bring tears to my eyes because it wasn't even about the lyrics, it's just about the actual composure of the music. So I've always loved music, always wanted to be a part of music, just never able to get my foot in the door, and went back to pharmacy benefits and pretty much stayed where I was comfortable. And then decided to try the cannabis industry. And that just is a very underpaid industry, a lot of work to be extremely underpaid, which was what made me go into being a retail pharmacy technician. And the everyday customer abuse after 2 years was enough for me. And I went into long term care pharmacy, so I could work remotely and not around patients directly anymore. Was not enjoying getting yelled at every day. And yeah, so.
You know, when you say this, I feel the parallel in my own story of I started with geography as a major, geographic information and remote sensing. And remote sensing was looking at frequency and looking at like radio frequencies and telemetry collars on animals and looking at all of these invisible spectrums that we don't see, although applying to the environment, not to the human health. And then thinking that this job, working in the not-for-profit and environment industry, paid not very well. So
Yeah,
switched to insurance and the corporate job, much like you're going into the pharmacy, but also not feeling aligned with it. This much like what you're saying is just the alignment not being there because
yeah.
clearly you're already looking at these alternative kind of lifestyles and modalities, but then yet participating in the one that isn't even really the one you feel from your heart. And I wonder on the full circle nature of this because in reading the papers that you have sent me, you're talking about music now, but in frequency. So maybe it's not
Mhm,
the melody of a song, but you're still
mhm.
dealing in frequency. And does that original experience you had with sound, does that still factor into what you're doing now, or are they like a separate container?
Well, I would say now with sound, it kind of just it makes sense to me after reading uh, a book by Toltec Nagel or Shaman, and he states that all the information comes from the sun, from the frequencies of the sun. So I just started making connections between things and just realizing that maybe it all this information and all is just coming from this source and this is where I need to be looking and heading to. Is that really possible? Is there some true connection to our material world, our existence, and light? And that kind of is what made me start thinking about that. And the whole thing with the 432 hertz, which is amazing, is because that's based on a 360-day solar harmonic. So the Mayans, the Toltecs, they believed that in order for life to exist, there had to be a planet revolving around its sun for 360 days. They knew that Earth was 365 days and point whatever it is. Um, but that's how they calculated that information from being in the sun and starting to realize that these frequencies were actually responsible for what was existing in front of them. Um, and what was really interesting is they believe that there are 9 specific waves that brought this information onto Earth, and that's where they have their one period, the pyramid of Quetzalcoatl, And during the summer solstice, you can specifically see what we're living in wave 9 now. And it's the only time that you can see wave 9 go down the staircase.
And so you're saying there's 9 different waves?
There were 9 different waves that ushered in evolution.
And I
And it's
love this because I do numerology as well too. And 9 is my favorite number because 9 disappears. And I think if they taught us geometry and they taught us like math in a way that was meaningful in school, we would have way more people interested in physics and math. But they teach it to us in a way that is so boring that we don't understand why geometry matters or why number matters. But 9 is like a number that is completion. It is the end of something because once you get to 9, you get to 10, and 10 now becomes like binary again, a 1 and a 0. It's choice again, it's the void, it's starting over again. And so 9 is this magic number of completion. And every time you multiply 9 by a number, it adds up to a number that will subtract back down to 9. So to make that sense to the audience, if it's like 9 times 2 is 18, 8 plus 1 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. 2 and 7 is 9. So no matter
yeah.
how far you take this, the 9 always disappears. So you're teaching me something new right now, and I do sound healing. And I did not know that 432 was related to the sun and this principle. And I feel like I have a new rabbit hole to go down. So to investigate that. But I love the fact that you're saying it's 9 because that makes so much sense to me. So I
Mm.
think that even though I had some other questions I wanted to ask, this is a perfect bridge into what is this holonomic fractal genesis and how does it relate to our human health and understanding of our own reality?
So basically, the engine that I built, the holonomic fractal genesis engine, was a deep learning model that I built based on the idea of this whole Mayan Toltec quantum science belief. Because I had made connections between quantum physics and what the Toltecs were saying. I wanted to see what AI was going to tell me. I wanted to see what connections were actually going to come to exist in a deep learning model. And there are special types of deep learning models that specifically are used for frequencies and frequency domains. And the whole idea of this holographic universe is that there's what's called a frequency domain or this pre-space vacuum, which is a two-dimensional surface. So you use one of these models, and basically with healing and all, and the whole thing with the frequencies, the deep learning model corresponds to the health because it's based on these frequencies. So it's able to give information based on the knowledge that I put in from traditional science and then this Toltec knowledge to generate what would be healing protocol for if we were truly living in a holographic universe. So, not to say that my model is correct or anything like that, but it made a tremendous amount of connections, even with the ancient Mayan and Toltec uh, stuff that I had put in. They had made connections with finding a frequency specifically corresponding to human DNA, which was amazing. It also calculated wave 10, and 10 is the phase transmission from carbon to light, where you lose your carbon form or you're dying, you become light again, and you return to the frequency domain, unless, like these Toltec shamans, believe you can stay in wave 9, and wave 9 is a period of infinite acceleration. So there's a way that you can keep the consciousness we have now and keep it, and either go to like orthogonal dimension or whatever. Otherwise, if you reach phase 10, then you return to pre-space. And if you believe in being reborn, this model That's what it told me. And then it referenced the Tibetan Book of the Dead on its own. I didn't plug this in. I just was like, hey, let me see. And then it said, do you want to see? Let's calculate to see if there's a wave 10. And then I asked it, is wave 10 the transition like to death? And then I started, well, I was reading, the Toltec book about all the information coming from the sun. Everything's in light, everything's energy. All this information is beaming from this source. Let's see if I can find any connections. And it pulled it out on its own. I didn't prompt it to do it, it did it on its own. And it made connections between the physical body and me typing in the fact that they did know about the 365 revolution, but they state that it only requires 360 days for life to exist. And then if you want to talk about today, that doesn't explain evolution, because it should have stayed as single cell organisms, and now we're humans. And how the amount of resources a human brain takes up that we learned about in neuroscience and in biology in general, it does not make sense. Humans take up so much that it should have never got to the level that we are now. So what's responsible for that? And that's where it comes into the idea that all these formulas that we discover in math and science and all, they're discovered. We don't necessarily create them. They're available to us. We connect to this pre-space time. These numbers, these frequencies, this geometry has some consciousness level way beyond our understanding. And it's really when our brain hemispheres connect, it's able to pull that information out, and then it becomes established.
So one of the
If that
things
makes
that
sense.
Yeah, one of the things listening to you is that it also just makes sense to me. This is the first time I'm hearing you explain the model, and it makes sense instantly to me because regardless of if you look at any other traditions, yoga, Buddhism, other things that I'm studied and trained in, or even something as basic as the seed of life and building the tree of life after from geometry and from creation as one gets added to two to three and we keep adding something and it creates geometric shapes. And I think that in yoga we look at the light and it ends again always with light, right? Because it is a light body. So we're always looking to go up to this light body where we're connecting all parts of ourselves. But I think for people that are viewing right now that maybe don't understand this at this higher level or they've never come across these things, to just back it up a little bit and understand how these frequencies actually are constructing our body. Because if you don't understand how this higher level thinking, so the theory behind how the sun is photons and how sound is phonons, and these packages of information are different frequencies which generate different things in the body. For those of us that still are in the paradigm of we are just a physical body that is carbon, as you're saying,
Mhm.
how do we bridge that between this information coming down and how it's actually structuring the very nature of our reality and maybe why it is that we're all stuck in our healing if we're in this paradigm where we're coming from the bottom up, assuming we're just a meat suit of biochemistry that is creating this byproduct of a brain just through evolution and having neurons. Where what you're saying is a completely different model where it's that
Mhm.
there's something already above. There was a basic fabric of the universe, some kind of physical information, which is governing the way that our consciousness and our bodies express themselves through frequency. So kind of just
Mhm.
talk people and maybe approach that in a way that makes sense in your model and how it's going to relate to people's actual physical health.
Basically, from this pre-space, this frequency domain, this information. So these waves are just information. So if there's a wave particle duality, then how we're made is these waves of information come out as they rip out of the black hole, then the sun takes a hold of this information and it weaves these particles into material matter, basically. So whatever wave comes out of there, they're weaved into the 3D material world that we're experiencing. So humans, we're packets of photons. It's the information coming, these waves coming, and then they're weaved together. And obviously, nothing is perfect. That's the whole fractal nature, not just of the model, but of entire human existence. If it wasn't a fractal and everything was perfect, all of space would burn up. And that leads to heat death. So the whole fractal nature of existence is what keeps things balanced. So this weaving of particles together, it does its best to transmit this information to, keep people healthy for the most part. Obviously, there are genetic disorders, there's unhealthy, but that's a matter of that information not being weaved together correctly. But like I said, there's the fractal nature to our reality. People are going to die. People are going to be sick. It's it's just kind of how it is. But the way to repair that is to be able to weave those packets back together. And you can do that through frequency technology, as well as it's more of experimental science right now, but trying to use a particle laser to reweave one's structure back together. But that's based on the idea that we are packets of photons, and what happens with, for instance, like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, the structure of the brain, it's just starting to come apart. The weaving of the body, it's reaching this phase transition to wave 10. So the carbon structure, the weaving is breaking apart. So all that information is now kind of just like, so what you can do, once we get this mentality and stop with this whole wave of let's just feed people pharmaceutical drugs that actually don't work, and looking at frequency healing or healing using something like a particle laser to weave some of these particles back together.
Okay, so the particle device is something that obviously that's experimental. I've never heard this yet. But
Mm-hmm.
in the other document you sent me, there was like a protocol that people with MS in particular
Mm-hmm.
that you suggested to follow. And so many of those things I'm already using in my personal care routine and also in my practice with other patients. And so I want to review each one of those things separately.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we get to some of them, there was a few of them that I had a lot of questions for you because there were things that I
Okay.
hadn't thought about before, but they really made sense to me as soon as I read them. So they were ones where
Okay.
I looked at it and I was like, "Oh, got it. I understand why you put that on the
Yeah.
list." So, if you would just go through some of the things that you think that, I know this podcast, we have people with all kinds of different things. You're saying you had seizures as what
Mm-hmm.
kind of was the frequency that was off in your body. But for
Mm-hmm.
people with MS in particular, and I seen you kind of link that to the vagal nerve as well,
Mm-hmm.
which makes sense to me. Like even before my MS manifested, I had a vagal nerve dysfunction as a child, and I used to pass out every time something scared me, and I'd be unconscious for some period of time. So there was already in my mind something with my energy signature or my frequency that was already disrupted quite early on. And in my whole
Mm-hmm.
life journey has been kind of piecing that back together bit by bit. But I noticed one thing you did say was PEMF. And
Mm-hmm.
for any of my viewers right now that are not familiar with that, this being pulse magnetic field therapy. And this is the idea of using electricity at a different frequency and pulse rate to generate a magnetic field which enters into the body and it gives voltage to the cells and negative ions, and it kind of energizes the body. So, is this something that you just recommend for people maybe with P that have MS, or is this kind of like a across the board beneficial?
So this is kind of across the board beneficial for a lot of the chronic illnesses that were on the document I provided for you. Excuse me. Same with the Rife generator as well. There are a lot of those do a lot of benefit because what people don't realize is all these things like Wi-Fi and all, they really affect the human body. And if we are made up all these frequencies, these photon pack, these environmental factors are having a tremendous amount of impact on your health. You can have a great diet, but if you're being affected by all these other environmental conditions, they're going to have drastic impacts on you.
And it's one of the
And
things. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
When you were talking about the sun, I mean, I view this when I write about it in a similar but a little bit different perspective. In that, even when you look at the Bible and they talk about the sun, when I read the Bible for the first time in my 40s without going to church ever or having been instructed on what it meant, I just read it the first time for myself. It played to me very much like a physics lesson
Mm,
in that the sun being referred to as when they say like you eat the body of Christ. Well, if the
mm,
sun is actually the sun, which is
mhm.
Jesus, is really the physical sun, that the sun is
Yeah.
sending you these photons of light, and that the light is entering into the plants, and then the animals are eating the plants, and we're eating the plants and the animals, and we're also getting the photons in us just through our own skin. And that this information at some point was very pristine in the way that
Yes.
you're saying. We didn't have spraying in the skies and we didn't have 5G and Wi-Fi. We didn't have all these dissonant frequencies. But even
Mm,
at the basic food level, it used to be that the food it was still authentic and organic. It wasn't genetically modified. It hadn't been highly processed, where that photon of light is disrupted now and it's almost gone out of the food. So we don't even really, as we're eating and consuming these things, we're not even really eating proper information. It's like eating a corrupted file,
mhm.
and our body doesn't understand
Yes.
what to do with it. And this
Yeah.
is, again, one of these questions I'd wanted to ask you earlier is how did you bridge your chemistry and your ethnobotany to with this frequency? Because even if we're all energy, and so we're
Mhm.
getting all this information is actually manifesting in some kind of particle, which is
Mhm.
creating this physical reality, whether it's illusionary or not. And how
Yeah.
is that still important then? Because clearly the chemistry in the physical body, we can't just ignore it and we can't just say, well, it's only frequency. Yes, frequencies are generating it, but it's still affecting us. So
Yeah.
how can the chemistry still build into this model?
So they can, and I plan on eventually generating a paper on it, but about the pharmacy industry and creating drugs that actually are based on this model that will not produce the side effects. So it'll give suggestions based on how to design these drugs to have the effects that people want without all these negative side effects. Um, if that's kind of what you were wondering.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a beautiful place to start because, I think that for most people, they like the idea of just healing being easy. So just give me
Mhm.
something, and then it kind of
Yeah.
takes some personal responsibility away. And I think that would be really beneficial for people. But for me, it's this broader question of like, how do we actually end up really viewing our physical body? So in my work, I talk about the koshas of yoga, which means these kind of
Mm,
concentric layers of our being. So we're starting with the physical body, an energy body, mental body, wisdom or instinct body, and then bliss, which is kind of the light, right? This more
Hmm.
spiritual thing, the source or that unified field, right? That thing at the top. And I always feel like I don't understand where people really jump in first because as much as the physical body has this kind of illusion to it, right? Because it
Hmm.
is just created from the frequencies. There's also a kind of primacy about it, though, too, because if you get the physical body wrong, you get disease, you get pain,
Hmm.
you could die from it. So there's still
Hmm.
this kind of like fundamental, the way this nature, even if it's geometry and photons and phonons, it is designed to make the body be very important and foundational in order for us to survive. Because if you get the
Yes.
top wrong, so say you just are not spiritually aligned or you have mental anxiety, you will survive still. Maybe it's
Yeah.
not a purpose, maybe it's not a good life, but you will still
Yeah.
survive miserably. But if you get the physical body wrong, you could die. So how is
Yeah.
it that there's this paradox, between the body being illusionary, but also being absolutely foundational?
So I would say that's just something that we're just trained to believe. That is just something we're conditioned into believing on. That's just how things work until you start to investigate things more for yourself in the cases of where you're just not getting that you want. There's a huge breakdown between considered pseudoscience and the mentality of just the traditional science and not really seeing the big picture, which is in a lot of ways, it's about the way that you live your life and your mentality. If you play this whole judge victim role for your entire life, you're going to be miserable, and being miserable is going to lead to bad health. It's going to lead to early death. um, there's a thing that a Toltec Nagel always says is you follow a path with heart, and no other path is worth following unless it has heart. So if if it doesn't, if you're not going to put your heart into it, it doesn't have meaning, then you shouldn't be following that. And people not living by a more spiritual ideal system kind of just deprives them of what's out there. People have really forgotten like the whole beautiful nature of how are we here, why are we here. um it's just like now it's I go to work, I do this, I'm a parent, blah blah blah. We've just completely lost connection. There's a huge disconnect. And I think that people just are so stuck in the mundane and the false reality that they're living in that it's just so much easier to continue doing the same thing over and over than actually taking the steps to get the healing. um, because people don't want to give up, you know, the things that are keeping them unhealthy, style of living, whatever it be.
Yeah, I think that you answered that beautifully because the same way I'm saying that there's this paradox with the physical body. I find that people who focus on the physical body a lot, so they do diet, they do exercise, they do their physio because so even these are even people that maybe got a diagnosis, but they don't want to do pharmacy. They still want to do something alternative, but everything they do still stays in the realm of physical body. And they
Mm,
don't ever really get to complete healing because you have to go beyond just that physical part.
yeah,
And as long as you stay stuck there, then you can't get to these higher realms of the information and the architect of true healing. But when you get all the way, what you're saying, to this kind of heart-centered, this purpose-driven, this higher place, what I call the bliss body, is that once you get there, I find that the people who live there, they almost get a bit of a free pass on some of the other layers where you
yes.
don't have to really follow the diets because you look at some people who smoke and drink and they seem to
Hmm.
not take care of themselves, but yet they live a long, happy life. And then you start
Yeah.
to look at them and you're like, well, why did they do it where this other person maybe didn't eat gluten and didn't eat dairy, and they went to the gym and they worked out, but they were so obsessed in the physical body that they ended up still being sick.
Yeah.
And so then you're right, where there's this the kind of higher level where if you get to there, this true healing can actually really, and you're not just going to even heal, then you're going to be a happier person too.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people they think of it as their material body. Like they don't realize how much uh your brain plays an aspect. If you're constantly miserable, you're constantly negative, angry, it's going to cause issues for you. It's going to lead to unhealthy habits. Um, and it ends up causing cortical damage eventually if you're not taking care of yourself. Um, and you can see that in studies that responding to ways like that can cause issues with your processing of information, which is done by your frontal lobe, um, and you make irrational choices. So you may be living like a great, healthy lifestyle, but yet your mental status, you're making all these irrational choices. Um, you're mistreating a spouse, whatever it is, but your conscious, your mental health level is completely toxic. Your physical health means nothing at that point.
And I think when and I'm going to reference back to when you're talking about wave and particle. So in the slit experiment, they showed that when you put light through a slit, that it behaves like a wave until somebody measures it or has the intention of measuring, and then it reduces into a particle or to material. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that people don't really apply that then to how that your mindset, how your
Mm-hmm.
words, how your thinking, how thoughts and emotion then become physical things and
Yeah.
they become physical things in your body and how that can relate so much. And with that in mind, I noticed that you're now getting into psychology and into the consciousness realm. And did that come before this work with the energy stuff and the frequency, or did that naturally lead you into this idea that our mindset was going to play a huge role in how the frequencies manifest in our field?
So I would say it was more about consciousness at first after reading the books by Carlos Castaneda. They just, I would just became very, very interested on this whole new perspective on how to live your life, what they call way of life, or a warrior's path. And a lot of people mistook it as these ancient people were killers or warriors or whatever, but it meant they were spiritual warriors and they were preparing for their battle against what they call death, the greatest battle one will ever face. So, being able to overcome that phase transition to wave 10, that's what their whole cultivation practice is. So, learning about that, and then it also talked about different plant medicines, psychoactive plant medicines, and experiences and explanations of what these beings were, um, and just the words that this, if you want to call him a shaman, um, just really resonated just with my like whole soul. It transformed my whole way of thinking completely. I was a very ignorant teen, very ignorant in my 20s until I read those books and I was just like this has completely transformed my life. And but it wasn't until later that I actually got into neuroscience and all that whole, if you want to call it metaphysical thing, was just kind of a personal thing for me. And It was kind of later on where I was like, holy crap, this stuff from these books, and I'm finding like connections and actual physics and science. And I'm like, how are people overlooking this? Like, you're not making the connections.
It is
Why? What?
amazing how that awakening journey sort of happens. And it can
Yeah.
just be one catalyst that comes in. And it's like almost like once you pull off that one book from the shelf, it's almost like your DNA, which is a library in and of itself, it pulls out something new and it puts back another book. And it's like everything just seems like it just, the synchronicities start to come to you and you start to
Mm,
see almost this geometry of the world and how all the pieces fit together. And it
mm.
reminds me even of how I came across you. I was having a coffee with my partner in the morning and I was trying to explain the holographic nature of the universe. Because I'm always
Yeah.
telling my kids we're holograms, and then they just like roll their eyes like, please don't ever say that in front of our friends. Like, you're so crazy. Why are you so crazy? And I always drop in these little comments. So I'm trying to explain this in too early. And my partner's probably thinking, like, I haven't even had a coffee yet. Like, please stop diving in already. Like, I'm not ready for this. And so I go over to the computer to leave him alone. And as soon as I open it up, I have a paper of yours. And I started reading it. I'm like, oh, so see, this is what I mean. As soon as you start looking, the universe will provide the answers. And it's as soon
Yeah.
as those first questions and the first little crack opens in you, all this, and that's what I hope today does for some listeners too, that even if they haven't understood all of the things you've said, and maybe
Yeah.
this is a big leap for them, maybe there's just like one little nugget that just the same way you're saying you read those books and it just instantly felt true. Like you
Mm,
remembered it as opposed to learning it, that
yeah.
maybe something will trigger in somebody and this curiosity will lead them down another path. And I just wanted to just like swing back again to some of the things you suggested as part of a protocol for somebody to heal themselves. And this one is a really purely personal question because I have used biomodulation and I use it in my
Mm,
practice, but it's all been based on red light. And I still use my red light therapy. But when I was looking at what you're talking about, you were suggesting blue light with MS. And it made
mm,
sense to me as soon as I heard it, but I had, for some reason, never put that together before. But blue light, for those that are listening are not familiar, is sort of during the daytime when we're trying to be energized. This is why we suggest not looking at blue light at nighttime before bed because it affects our circadian rhythm. And and we already know that the infrared is very healing and it's energizing for the mitochondria and for our cells. But when
mm.
you're talking about using blue light in this one specific circumstance, why is that? And can you explain that a little bit to me, why that would be beneficial?
Well, it's beneficial because each spectrum of to what's needing to be healed. So while red light, will heal certain aspects, a combination of the two, even and that usually goes with any type of doesn't have to be light frequencies, but sound frequencies, using combinations of them have a much more they're much more effective. So using the two together provides a lot more relief and a lot more strength and resistance against the effects that one will experience from them.
So I'm not sure if you're familiar. I want to say his name is Albert Fitzpop. So he was the one that first said we're light beings, and he discovered that cells have like little rings of light around them, and that our bodies are communicating with light. And what I found interesting about his work is that he showed that every cell should have a very coherent ring of light emitting around
Mm,
it. It's not a very big field, but it's coherent, it's even all the way around. And that's how each cell communicates from one. And that's actually better than even when we think about our nerves or our hormones, our transmitters. They take a long time to actually move through the body. But light
yeah.
traveling through this matrix of, whether we want to call it the fascia or it could be the fourth phase of water, because water holds this information and
Mm,
communicates it very quickly. But they looked at, like, say, taking a chicken, whether it was factory farmed or pasture raised chicken, and looking at the egg, and then saying, based on how the cell looked under a microscope, you could tell whether that was, healthy or it wasn't
Yeah.
healthy because it had been modified or damaged in some way.
Mm.
And what I found the most fascinating is as he looked at each different disease and different kinds of cells, when they looked at MS was like an enigma on its own. It didn't follow any of the other disease patterns. MS showed that there was a ton of light coming out. So it wasn't like
Mm.
a cancer where it was like bright on one side, not good on another. So it wasn't like replicating correctly, right? Because the
Mhm.
information was messed up. With MS, it was just saying like there was no boundary on the amount of
Yeah.
light coming out. And MS is very linked with vitamin D deficiency because in the higher latitudes, there's more MS. And I just wondered, it gave me this new curiosity that I'm going to go down with blue light and healing because a lot of people are also not just blue light sensitive, but fluorescent lights. And I know
Hmm.
myself very sensitive to Wi-Fi and to like
Mm.
radiation of any kind. And I found it fascinating to go down. And one more thing that you had put down there, which again made sense to me as soon as I read it, was the idea of using like topical magnesium and then using the
Hmm.
red light on top of it.
Hmm.
And what would be the benefit of doing that?
So it's really so a lot of people, me included, I mean, and it kind of just depends on your biochemistry. Not all people absorb magnesium correctly or well. So, like for me, for somebody with epilepsy, they don't process food correctly. So I usually eat something. That's why I'm so skinny. I eat so much food and just I don't gain any. So it's not guaranteed that the magnesium, when you ingest it and it goes through your digestive process, that it's going to actually effectively work throughout. So by rubbing it on your skin and rubbing it on mucous membranes, it has a much more effective chance of actually getting it into your blood. So that is the actual benefit to it. Because like it could lead up to a build of it. So like for me, for instance, if I drink like a protein shake that's like got magnesium, I break out in hives all over my neck. It's itchy, painful. So using something like that is kind of um, for people who don't digest it properly. I mean, if you do, if you can, that's fine. But if you don't, that's kind of like the benefit because it'll go into your bloodstream quicker because it does not have to go through the long digestive
And
process.
as somebody who uses and provides PEMF services, one of the things that it does is it helps to energize the cell and make the cell membranes less sticky to each other because they're kind of bouncing off of each other. And
Mhm.
it's opening all the ion pumps in them so that nutrients can come in and the metabolic waste can go out. And for listeners that aren't aware, one of the fundamental things that you need in your body in order to do all of these processes is magnesium. And we do live in a world where magnesium through factory farming and monocropping, like our soil is depleted of magnesium. So you're likely, even if you eat organic and healthy, you're probably not getting enough magnesium. And anyone that has disease, I'm going to suggest that you probably have a dysregulated nervous system. And that will be because of your thinking and some of the things that have happened, trauma in your life
Mhm.
that you use the magnesium, you use it up way quicker in your body when you're stressed out. It like absorbs it and depletes it. So this
Yeah.
is a really beneficial, I would say, great for MS because it is a nervous system disorder, but probably across the board is a good recommendation for most people. Again, though, that I'm not like a naturopath or a doctor giving medical advice, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think, on your own, research, do it. It's probably beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, they suggest magnesium for a lot of people. They do for epilepsy patients. It's kind of hit or miss. Like, I mean, if your biochemistry is weird and you can't digest it, then you'll have an allergic reaction, which I actually found out from my hairdresser in Maryland, who was also um, EMT, and he was like, "You got a magnesium rash on your neck." He's like, "Are you drinking protein drinks?" And I was like, "Yes." And he's like, your body's not digesting them. He was like, you should probably stop. He's
Isn't
like,
it
that's
amazing where you get the proper medical advice from?
yeah,
Right? Yeah.
yeah.
So that will actually lead me into the next thing is so with some of these so what was specific to your condition that you used that was like beneficial? So this model suggests certain things to do. What are those things and what was the benefit or the results you've seen?
So specifically, CBD, it was has been tremendously helpful. And I know that's not with frequencies, but anybody who is suffering from seizures, mine are pretty bad. Every time I have a seizure, I have a grand mal seizure. If you can afford CBD, I highly recommend that you use high quality CBD. I went seizure free for 11 months. So I definitely recommend that. Um, as far as healing goes with that is there's not a lot of research for brain health, but it is showing that gamma frequencies have showed um, benefit for seizures and for Parkinson's disease. So that I know there is a brain health protocol in the thing that I sent you. Um, but doing something, I don't know if you're familiar with Hemi Sync.
No.
Okay, so it's a process that was invented by the Monroe Institute and later investigated by the CIA with frequencies and connecting the hemispheres of your brain through sound. And that is how that can help learning how to get your brain to work as one again can help with that um, along with a healthy diet or whatever. But learning how to retrain your brain to work as a single unit again um, greatly helps with any chronic illness at all. But it is something I would recommend people getting into. You put in two headphones. Same thing as the whole idea behind binaural audio or binaural beats. It connects to hemispheres of your brain together to help promote healing. And that what it does is it connects the hemispheres of your brain and sends the information throughout your nervous system to the corresponding areas.
It's one of the things I use in my sound healing practice is my favorite tuning forks are the solfeggio frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
And again, talking about nine, all the frequencies there, they add up to nine every time. But when you
Yeah.
play the two of them together, so you take two different forks. So normally when you play tuning forks, people think about entrainment in the sense that like if you strike one tuning fork, another one that's at the same frequency will resonate at the same time. But with the binaural
Mm-hmm.
beats, what you're trying to do is actually you're playing to the brain two different frequencies in the hope that the frequency difference between the two frequencies is going to have some kind of effect as well on the brain. And I found it to be
Mm-hmm.
very beneficial, especially and it still worked with people who had impaired hearing, which I thought was
Yeah.
interesting because they didn't even actually
Yes.
really need to hear the tuning fork. It was the vibration itself provided
Mm-hmm.
still information to the cell because it bypassed just the auditory acoustics and it got into that actual frequency and vibration, which was interesting.
So that was a concept originally brought up by Carl Pribram. That him and Carl Lashley both proposed the idea that the brain works as a whole. So you could reconstruct an entire brain from a small piece, and that's where they came up with this whole holographic idea of the brain, um, and that these frequencies corresponded specifically to uh, the things that you were just discussing right there is that then these waves connecting, being able to provide the reality that we were experiencing and creating a harmonic resonance with the environment again. And they came up with a whole idea that was very interesting. Um, with the idea is you remember, your body remembers how to be healthy. There's a part inside your brain, but you forgot. And there's a way to entrain yourself through the protocol that's on the paper there. I don't remember the steps exactly, but training yourself to manifest that basically through words and real intention, and that your brain can actually physically manifest those things because of how we're attached to all these frequencies, and we can correct them um, when we once we learn how to correctly process the information. So, for instance, like how you were saying, the person uh, could had damaged hearing. That just the vibration of these frequencies were able, in other patients that they had done experiments on, being able to project the sound, and even for blind patients, they were having a visual experience from the vibrations of connecting their hemispheres together, because it provides the whole idea with HemiSync 2 is to help you uh, resonate with that pre-space time frequency domain.
It calls to mind a story I heard about somebody doing a DMT experience and they had never seen before. They had been blind since birth. So you would think that they don't have any visual references. So even they wouldn't
Mm.
dream in imagery because they have no stored memory of what an image of anything looks like or what a color looks like. And when given DMT, they had a complete experience of seeing and that they cried through the entire thing because they had like a movie playing in their mind, which really, begs this question of like, where is the information then coming from? So this person didn't have this byproduct of a brain that had experienced these things. They had information coming from somewhere else that appeared in their holographic nature. So one of the things I just wanted to mention here too is I do bioresonance scanning on
Mm.
people's biofield using their voice or handheld device, and it gives like a report of the frequencies of somebody's blueprint as it's operating, and it compares it to what like expected frequencies should be, and to see what part of the blueprint is sort of offline. And what I found interesting in all of that, and it's making me think about what you're
Mm.
saying right now, is they think about there's like they call it the glial cell. And I know in the glial cell, when I think about MS and traditional science, the glial cell is more just about this part of the brain that's supporting the axon or the oligodendrocyte. I can't remember which part it's supporting in there, but we think
Mm.
about it just as this one, physical and chemical function. But under this, who's Dr. Peter Fraser, who developed this software, and he's a traditional Chinese medicine doctor, said that the glial cell becomes almost like a factory reset for your holographic nature. So when we work with the glial cell now and we work to support the energetic blueprint there, that's that thing that's going to help to reset whatever has come out of balance in your field. And as much as I think that that's all fascinating and that we can put these frequencies into the body, what I wonder is, even if we put this corrective information in, if we don't have our thoughts right and we don't have our emotions and our mindset right, then will we not just come out of balance again and the frequencies will go back to distortion?
Most certainly, and that is like the whole thing, which is what I loved about the Toltecs in general. And basically, yes, that's what's going to happen. If you don't stick to the protocol, you're gonna revert back to the cycle, um, and it's very hard to break that cycle. So it's kind of like it very well could be the case that that would be happening again, but with with the right mindset, you could overcome that.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to have that hopeful outlook on that, like doing hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming as a way to help people. Because I think consciously most of us would want to be healthy and most of us want to do the right things. But there is that piece of us that self-sabotages, that always breaks the diet, that, like you were saying earlier, are people actually going to do the work? Because it still
Yeah.
requires physical actions that are correct to fix these things. And for a lot of people, they just want a pill because it's easier. Somebody else will fix me and I don't have to do the work. But it is possible if we get into the somatics and into the body or into the subconscious, if we can reprogram that so it becomes congruent and on the same side as our conscious intention, change is possible, but it takes effort and it takes, willingness to stay present and aware for people. It's not like a quick fix like most people are looking for.
Yeah. One of the things is a lot of people just we're so caught up in this whole material world and money matters and this matters and we got to do this for our family and we completely neglect ourselves. And we can still do the things that we need to do on a daily basis, but not plague ourselves with the whole mentality that's holding us back. Um, and that is the tricky balance of living in a normal world and then applying this pseudoscientific or shamanistic view to your everyday life. And it's a challenge for everyone to do. People are like, how am I supposed to just get up and do? It's not going to be easy. It's going to be a lot of work. But do you want to keep doing the same thing over and over, or do you want something different for yourself?
If you want the freedom to be healthy, you have to take responsibility. It is a sovereign act, and it's one that requires agency on your part to be responsible. So as we're kind of thinking about wrapping things up here, I wondered if you could provide just some really general, easy things somebody can implement right now if their frequency and their harmony is a little bit out of balance and it's manifesting in physical disease or mental distress.
So, what I would do first is, depending on what the illness is finding what frequency is connected to that, and then start working on treating that. So there are the protocols in there for a couple different things, but the frequency tuning to the specific tuning for the health issues you're looking for, that is the starting point. Is finding what that frequency is, so you know where to navigate. And then the next is um, the materials you're going to need to do it. And the home protocols are easy. Another thing, solarizing your supplements. It's a great thing to do. It helps your body actually, they become
Can you
more
explain that?
bioavailable.
Can you
So
explain what that means?
solarizing your supplements would be putting them into a glass bottle, or if they're already in a glass bottle, you put them out there. Right, the best time to do it is like right at sunrise.
Mm.
Um, Another good thing to do, though, also is while you're solarizing your supplements, is to go outside and look at the sunrise without contacts, glasses, or anything like that, because you're going to absorb the most of the light that you want at that moment. And that is the most powerful time to get healing from the sun, is right at sunrise. So you both want to solarize your supplements by putting them in a glass bottle, let them get like an hour of full sun, and then take them. And
I
it's
would even add
also good
into
to take
water here too.
structured what?
I would even add in the water too, to
Yeah,
structure the water.
structuring your
Mm.
water is and there are several different ways to do it in the document I provided you. But yeah, structuring the water helps make those supplements as well more bioavailable. And a lot of issues that people don't realize is that we have a lot of water built up that's not being distributed correctly. And a lot of it is because um, it's not structured correctly. The water should be in these nice hexagonal, healthy, geometric forms. Instead, you got a bulk supply of water built up in these fat cells that are causing issues. You naturally want all this water, since we're 70% water, to be clean and clean flowing. So structuring your water, using a vortexer or a glass stirring rod, because you want to make a vortex in it specifically.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I distill my water, but then because it's deadened, the water is, it's lost not only all its minerals, but also its movement. So I do the same thing. I add Celtic salt or colloidal minerals back in, and I play tuning forks to it, leave it in the sun at the window
mhm.
so that it's getting all that sun information. And these things sound like they might be complicated, but honestly, once you add them as part of your routine, they just become normal.
Yeah,
Another thing I just wanted you to maybe mention to viewers, because it came across not just in the MS protocol section, but in multiple other places, and I'm sure even for your seizures as well, it would apply there, was grounding.
yes. So a lot of people don't understand how important it is to have our connection with the earth. So grounding or earthing is basically a process of walking on grass, dirt, whatever. But excuse me, reconnecting with the earth, the Schumann frequency resonating through your body. Um, that's a lot of people we spend time in an office or we walk around in our house. We're not outside walking around barefoot. People are like, ew, my feet are going to get dirty. They don't realize that absorbing the earth's natural frequency is actually healing their body. You're not going to step outside and step on the ground and you're going to be healed of cancer. Not saying that, but it is very important for you to be absorbing this frequency, because this is how we're connected to the earth, and everything's connected to the earth by grounded into this dirt, soil, whatever. But
And I
you
think you also
want
get the
this to be,
microbiome also.
yeah,
I mean, from a whole
yes.
nother, if we're going back to biochemistry, you're also
Mm-hmm.
getting the biome of the earth because you need to come into contact with even gardening or your feet in the grass. You need that biome also to interact with the microbes on your skin. And we
Yeah.
disinfect everything a little too much in life. Getting dirty outside is okay.
Yes. Agreed. Agreed.
So, just to leave anybody here with any last words of wisdom, advice, or anything you want the viewers to know before we wrap up.
Um, Healing is going to be a challenge, especially when you have chronic illness. It's not hopeless. You can look at it as an opportunity for something new. One thing I would say to people who are going to be struggling with the idea of this: write a list down, put it on your bathroom mirror, put it on your fridge, just to remind yourself every day of, hey, this is what I need to do. This is what's going to make me take that step to changing my life. And having a constant reminder, I think, is a really great way to go about it, because without a constant reminder, you're going to get to the point where you're going to be like, yeah, I might do this for a week. But when you come into your bathroom every morning and you see a list of protocols that you should be doing, you're going to be much more focused on doing those things. So I highly recommend to people, just, you know, and it sounds silly, but put something like that together. It will make it easier for you to actually follow through with.
You know what? The simple things are always the most true.
Yeah.
And what your consistency is absolutely key. So we would never expect to go to the gym one time and have a bikini body. We know we
Yeah.
have to go show up over and over. And for your health, it's going to be the same thing. It took a lot from, unless we were born with something wrong with us, most of us got sick with death by a thousand cuts. Toxic food, EMF exposure, bad relationships, bad job, disconnecting from spirituality. It wasn't just one thing, it was many things. And getting healthy, it's the same process, but the undoing of it. Taking
Hmm.
one layer off, taking another until your bucket gets empty enough that your body, which knows how to heal itself, will
Hmm.
do on its own. But you have to stop burdening it. You have to take away
Yeah.
some of the toxicity and the dissonant frequencies. So, where, if people want to learn more about your work and about these theories you're working on, and reach out to you, how do people get a hold of you?
So if you have a LinkedIn, you can find me on LinkedIn. Um, right now, I do not have my Facebook up and running anymore. I do not have Instagram. I'm not really on social media too much. But you can reach out to me on Instagram, or you can reach out to my personal email at Jess, Jess dot Leffler, Leff like Frank, Ler 13 at gmail.com, and I can answer any questions. All of my papers, though, right now that I have printed are all published on LinkedIn.
Okay, I'll make sure that all of that is available for everybody in the show notes below. So if anybody wants to reach out or learn more, they'll find you there. And I'd like to just thank you for coming on today and taking the time. And I hope the viewers today, I hope that you found a little nugget of truth, something that when you heard it and it was spoken to you, that it touched a piece of you and sparked something within you that'll be the catalyst for your own healing journey. Because, as just alluded to, none of these things are a quick fix or something that's going to happen immediately. This is all a relearning and an unlearning and a curiosity that's required for you to follow your own solutions, seek your own answers. But know that you are not broken. Know that healing is possible. And in my mind, inevitable as soon as we make the right energetic and information environment for our body. And everything downstream of that, the biochemistry will follow. So, with that in mind, if this resonated with you, consider subscribing or liking this video and to receive more content in the future. And also maybe share it with somebody that you know that it needs this message right now. And with that in mind, we'll see you on the next exploration. Thanks for tuning in. Namaste. Thank you for listening to Mind Over MS. For more episodes, guided meditations, and healing resources, follow Energy Over Matter and subscribe wherever you are listening. Until next time, this is Dana Wilder signing off. Have a blessed day and a blessed life. Namaste.